The River Dee is the most famous and perhaps the most dramatic river in northeast Scotland.
I love the Dee. It's a river of many moods and different characters, each depending on the season, which makes it difficult to pin down, but that's part of its magic and charm.
Scotland's rivers are among the country's greatest treasures. The enduring force of their seaward flow has shaped the landscape, creating our glens and valleys. Rivers are the life-giving arteries of history. The first people to come to Scotland used rivers as natural highways. They settled along their banks where towns and cities grew. In this series, I'm celebrating the rich and fruitful relationship between rivers and people and meeting a cast of characters who live along the banks of our great waterways. I'll uncover intriguing tales from the past and experience the glories of the ever-changing scene. In this programme, I'm continuing down the River Dee on a grand tour from the Cairngorm Mountains to the sea. My journey begins in the village of Ballater, threads the Maiden Stone, attempts heavy lifting by the river at Potach, then breathes in the scent of lavender, before racing like a clipper to the sea. This is Ballater, a village with some impressive and historic royal connections, being at the centre of a stretch of the river known the world over as Royal Deeside. In 1866, the railway from Aberdeen was completed and a station built at Ballater. Being the closest to the royal residence at Balmoral, it was used by Queen Victoria and her family.
Later, Victoria's grandchildren and their offspring would come on Highland holidays, including the German Kaiser, who would plunge Europe into the First World War, his cousin Tsar Nicholas, who was executed during the Russian Revolution, and George V, Britain's wartime king. War and revolution, it seems, can be a family affair.
The old railway closed in 1966. Today, its route is used by a long-distance path called the Deeside Way. I'm going to be using it quite a bit on this grand tour, but before I continue much further, I want to get closer to the river itself. Upstream from the old footbridge over the River Dee, I meet up with former canoe instructor Dale Kitching. Together we paddle downstream, while local folk take a plunge into its unusually calm waters.
Now, Dale, it's a very gentle River Dee we've got today, but I'm guessing it's not always so, because I've seen pictures of what the Dee's like, or can be like in winter, and it seems to be a destructive, almost unstoppable force.
Well, during Storm Frank, the river was right up to the level of the bottom of the bridge ahead of us, and in fact a tree jammed against it and bent the bridge.
Well, that's amazing, almost unimaginable, because the water level then must have been, 20 feet above where we are at the moment. Now, has climate change got anything to do with this, the fact that the river levels are changing so dramatically?
I think almost certainly. We're getting exceptionally hot droughts and also exceptional, unusual storms in winter.
Because the water is so low, Dale, do you think we're going to get to our destination?
Well, I think we'll get to our destination, but I think there might be a bit of pulling of boats, a little bit of carrying of boats, a bit of wading.
Right.
Could be an entertaining trip today, I think.
Passing beneath the old bridge, the river becomes much shallower. It's now a struggle to paddle our canoe without bumping against the occasional rock.
Oops.
Oh, it's a rocky road we're travelling.
Or running aground on the riverbed and having to wade into the water.
Well, he did warn me that this might happen, but it's being able to read the river that's so important. I'm scanning ahead all the time for possible rocks and hazards. There's a very obvious one there. Whoa, bump again.
But after a couple of near misses, we emerge into a calm pool and our final destination, a mysterious river boulder known as the Maiden Stone. In local mythology, it was a fertility stone. Young women hoping to fall pregnant would wade out into the river and pass through the hole like threading a needle. If they went the wrong way against the flow, they'd remain permanently barren.
So it's not very big, this rock, but it is remarkable.
The hole is
isn't it?
getting bigger.
Now, Dale, I might be wrong, but I suspect that this whole rock has been shifted on its side, and perhaps centuries ago there would have been a boulder or something with some stones inside, because that has
Yes.
been ground out by a stone within a hollow.
It's a
And then
pothole.
the whole thing has been
It's a
moved.
pothole and it's
Isn't
been
it?
moved, but it's
Yeah.
been here like this for a long
For
time.
centuries and centuries.
Yeah.
And do you think maidens really did wade out here to thread the fertility stone?
I'm sure
the
they
maiden
did.
Stone? Have you tried it?
I have.
Have you? Would you like to demonstrate it for me?
Absolutely, and then it's your turn.
My turn? Well, not sure about that. You're going to get stuck.
Me? I'm not going to get stuck.
Well, you. Oh, well done.
But
Well
it's
done.
quite big, Paul. You could fit through there
Do you think so?
easily.
I've had rather a few pies recently.
I don't want to disappoint Dale, so face up to the challenge. Although, to be honest, with 5 kids already, maybe calling on the stone's special powers is asking for trouble.
This is very undignified. I don't think.
It's very undignified. Dignified camera angle, I would say.
Forget about threading the eye of a needle. This is more like wriggling through a birth canal.
Oh, Dale, what can I say? Well, quite a few things actually, but I'd like to say thank you very much for showing me the River Dee and this extraordinary maiden stone.
So child number 6 coming up.
Now you never know.
Back on dry land, I follow the river towards Potock Bridge, made famous through the Herculean exploits of a local stonemason, Donald Dinny, who set the bar for male strength in the 19th century by lifting 2 enormous boulders known as the Dinny Stones. To find out more, I'm meeting up with strongman Brett Nichol beside the river.
Donald Dinny was a Scottish strongman and Highland Games athlete. He's also known as well for wrestling and all other feats of strength.
So he was a kind of sports superstar of the
Like,
Victorian
he was
age.
your first world superstar.
Really?
Yeah, absolutely.
Donald's route to sporting fame had humble beginnings, working with his father as a stonemason. One of their jobs was to repair Potock Bridge over the River Dee.
That's the bridge that him and his father were appointed to fix, right? And they collected a couple of stones for Belogie Estate. And that's where the Dinny stones came. They went and collected these stones, put rings in them, so they could tie ropes on them for the ballast on the bridge. Him and his father, as they did, they carried them across the bridge, but they did it singly.
Right.
But Donald, not to be outdone by his father, one day picked them both up, one on each hand, and carried them across the bridge. And that's pretty much where the legend started, really.
What kind of weight was that?
Well, it's 144 and 188, which is 333.
That's astonishing weight.
Aye, kilograms, yeah.
Brett leads me away from the river to a place where the Dinny stones are kept.
So are these they then?
Yep, this is the famous Dinny stones, yep.
It's absolutely enormous.
Yep, they certainly are.
And very few people on this planet have been able to lift both of those at once.
Well, unassisted since the 50s, there's been 202 people.
That's very, very few. So just demonstrate for me how we go about it. I
Well-
mean, there must be a position you
Well,
take.
there's a straddle position, it's called. Yep. Bit like that. Get a good pull and lift.
Right.
Hold for 2 seconds, put them down. And that's your
Easy as
official.
that. Easy as that. Right.
Yeah. Come on, man! Here we go.
Today, a small but enthusiastic crowd has gathered to cheer on a lifting challenge, which attracts an international following. Each of the participants goes forward for 3 attempts to lift and hold the stones for at least 2 seconds. It looks enough to burst a blood vessel, or worse. Mark Sheriffs tells me more about the history of stone lifting in Scotland.
Brilliant effort, but unfortunately didn't quite manage to lift them.
Yeah, but I was hoping to be the first oldest man to use open grip without hook, but with this 32 degrees of heat, which is uncommon up here,
It's very uncommon.
they were just slipping out my hands and I couldn't get grip, so we'll try again.
But these are not the only stones that you can lift in Scotland. There are quite a few of them. Do you know anything about the history of the tradition?
Yeah, there's at least 20 to 30 what's called manhood stones or testing stones all over. With lovely names and locations like the Fianna in Glen Lyon. You've got the Mingus just up the road there, at Aberfeldy.
These big stones?
These are big stones, aye. These are 118 kilo. The Fianna's 127 kilos.
Why stones? Why are people lifting stones? Why are men testing their strength against stones?
That's what they're called, testing stones. The stones and lovely stones that were shaped with the rivers and things were used by the clan chiefs. You know, chieftain stones, testing stones, and the strongest guys that could lift these stones were put into better positions within the armies and the clan systems.
So it's a way of proving your strength and your worth to the chief.
Exactly.
Going up. Keep going. Keep going.
Among the wannabe lifters are men from the USA and Germany. And today, new names will be added to those who met the challenge of the legendary Dinnie Staines. For some, the rewards of success are more immediate.
Well done.
Others have a more philosophical perspective.
I don't need to use them tomorrow, so we're good. We're good. Don't need to use them tomorrow. We're good. I came from America to do this, so it's a lot of history behind these stones, so just to be able to get them off the ground is good enough for me. So.
All this sinew-popping effort has left me feeling oddly weak, and I move on, keeping to the Deeside Way until I reach the village of Banchory. In the 19th century, Banchory's fine air and invigorating climate inspired doctors to establish a German-style sanatorium for the cure of tuberculosis patients. Here they came to restore health to diseased lungs.
Sadly, the old building burned down several years ago, but Banchory's healthy climate continues and once provided the perfect environment for a flourishing and fragrant industry.
In the 1950s, Banchory became known the world over for the production of lavender-based perfumes and cosmetics, derived from locally planted fields of blue lavender. Sadly, the lavender fields have gone, but on the outskirts of the village, Julie Ray is reviving the scented tradition and producing a range of lavender-based products.
You must have been aware of the long tradition of lavender growing in Banchory in this part of Deeside.
Absolutely. A man called Drew Youngster started it in 1946. And he's from Shetland, and he came here and cultivated his own lavender called Torravort, which he thought would withstand the winters that we had here at that time. It's all changed. And it really worked very successfully. And then he bought a couple of acres of land the following year, planted some lavender, started distilling the oil, and then he made a factory and employed lots of people, and they made perfumes and toiletries, and it was sold all over the world. Airlines used it. It was in Raffles hotels. It was in Singapore. It was everywhere.
A prestige product.
Absolutely was worldwide.
And it must have been a wonderful sight too, coming into Banchory in those days with fields of lavender surrounding the village.
I think it must have been. I didn't see it, unfortunately, but all the local people that I've spoken to about the lavender have very fond memories of seeing purple fields, and they have relatives who worked in it, and they visited the factory themselves and saw how it all worked.
But sadly, lavender seemed to have gone out of fashion. Is there any reason for that, do you think?
I think a lot of people associated it with something their granny would use, and childhood memories of smelling it in granny's bedroom or on a handkerchief or something like that, and just people went off of it.
Not racy enough, do you think?
You got a racy granny. But I do think just in the last sort of 5 to 8 years, or maybe slightly longer, people realise the benefits from lavender, you know, that it can calm you and it can soothe you, and it's good for burns and bites and all sorts of things. And I think it's slowly crept back in.
Julie's venture is keeping the Deeside lavender tradition alive. She shows me how she produces the oil using an antique copper still, which works like a mini whisky still.
So in here we'll put the lavender flowers and the hot water. And as
It's like a kettle.
As a kettle. And it creates a steam through the lavender plants, and the oil will then float to the top, and it'll come out into a tube, which you can then just put into a little bottle.
Right.
But for lots and lots of lavender, you get a very small amount of oil. So the people wonder why lavender oil is expensive, and that's exactly what it is.
With lavender oil at a premium, I'm given the heavy responsibility of cutting a block of soap into individual bars.
So you
Like
just do a
cheese.
nice straight one. And yes.
Straight down. Oh,
There
it's
you go.
soft as butter. Look
Yeah.
at that. I'll give it a wee sugar. Have I made a mess?
I think you've done very well. So if you would like to do that for me for the rest of the summer, that would be great.
I'd love to. But sadly, I have other things to do. Look at that. It's beautiful colour. Beautiful smell. A wee reminder and souvenir
Absolutely.
of Banchory and Deeside.
With my soap to keep me fragrant, I continue along the Dee, where the path I'm treading still follows the old Deeside Railway. This is the same line that ran from Aberdeen and terminated at Ballater before it was closed in 1966. Here, I'm thrilled to see it's been restored by volunteers to allow engines to pull carriages for about a mile towards Banchory. At Milton of Crathy's railway station, I meet up with Bill Halliday to learn more about the Royal Deeside Line and its restoration.
Now, imagine a railway of this age would have had a significant number of important connections because this is Royal Deeside.
Yes, indeed. Queen Victoria, of course, used it regularly, as did other royals visiting, including the Tsar of Russia and the Tsarina.
Right.
I can't remember the date of that, but 1859, I think. It was the longest train ever. He came with all his own staff, including, we understand, his food, because he didn't particularly like British food.
Did he not? He preferred to stick to his caviar and champagne.
Presumably,
Yeah,
yes.
yeah. And this building here is rather lovely, isn't it? The ticket office and the shop.
Yeah, I'm rather proud of it. It's
excellent.
It's a really interesting project.
In a nearby shed, Bill shows me an ongoing project of love and labour which will hopefully soon grace the line.
So this is it. This is your amazing railway carriage, wooden railway carriage.
This is it, yes.
Where did you get it from?
It came from Nottinghamshire, where it was used by a family as a house.
Good grief.
Well,
not just in that. They must have...
No, they built outside, which is probably why this was in such good condition.
So this formed the core of a family home?
It did, yes, yeah.
That's
For
incredible,
about 60 years, I think they lived
amazing,
in it. Yeah,
amazing.
it is.
Can we go inside?
You can.
The wooden carriage was originally designed as a luxury picnic coach for railway executives touring the network.
So this was designed as a jolly, really, for the elite.
Yes.
The railway elite.
Absolutely. There would have been benches along here.
Really?
And tables down the middle. This end here is the pantry, where all the hampers that would have been kept at this end, with no doubt sufficient bottles for the day. And then, of course, disposed of at the other end. That would have been the toilet.
Right.
The carriage is a decade-long project, and once complete, it will run alongside the river as a picnic coach once again.
It's a huge undertaking, this project, really, isn't it? In terms of time, investment of time and money, too.
It is, but it's enjoyable. And it's worth doing, because it's one of only two.
Well, I have to say, Bill, standing here takes me back to my student days, because I actually lived in a railway carriage, very, very similar to this one. But it was perched on top of a cliff just south of Stonehaven. My girlfriend and I rented it for £2 a week, I think it was. It might even been £2 a month, but it was dirt cheap.
Well, snap. I mean, I was brought up in a coach.
Were you really?
Yeah, in my early days for about 4 years, yeah. My dad was in the railway, and he was able to get one, which, since we couldn't get a house, or he couldn't get a house at the time. So very happy memories of living in it and running along the roof. And,
Now, we had a great view of the North Sea.
Oh, you would do, yeah. You got to be fully exposed.
Exactly. It was very primitive.
Yeah.
Having bonded with Bill as railway children of sorts, my wish to ride on the footplate there and back again is granted.
Here we go.
And we're off, but not for long. The line runs out after just a mile of track. Then driver Dr. Chris engages reverse gear and it's back to where we started. Rather slowly. It's a bit like life, really. And with that profound thought, I hop off and head back to the river. Beyond Milton of Crathes, the Deeside Way continues through rich agricultural land right up to the city outskirts of Aberdeen and Journey's End. Aberdeen, Aber meaning at the mouth of, is the third biggest city in Scotland.
I got to know Aberdeen very well when I was a student here at the university back in the 1980s. And it seems like only yesterday that I was having classes in the old King's College or enjoying a pint or two at the St Macher Bar.
When I wasn't slaving away in the ancient library, which, to be honest, I rarely did, or enjoying a pint, which I did regularly, then I used to visit the busy harbour, which developed where the river meets the sea. Over the decades, the harbour has changed and adapted to circumstance. For many years, it was one of the biggest and most important fishing ports in the UK, supporting a huge fishing fleet and thousands of jobs on shore.
By the time I arrived in Aberdeen as a student, oil was king, having pretty much pushed fishing to the margins, and the city now proclaimed itself as the oil capital of Europe.
North Sea oil, once the only game in town, is still hugely important, but the emphasis is shifting now. Today, energy production increasingly focuses on wind power. And before it turned the blades of turbines, wind filled the sails of the world's fastest ships, which were built in Aberdeen.
In Victorian times, the fastest ships on the ocean were the tea clippers, and the most famous of them all was the Cutty Sark. But she wasn't the fastest. That title belonged to an Aberdeen-built ship, the Thermopylae.
To discover more about the clipper ships, I've come to the Aberdeen Maritime Museum, which is stuffed to the gunnels with nautical artefacts. Curator Ross McLennan tells me how the fastest sailing ships in the world were built in Aberdeen.
From the late 1700s and into the 1800s, it really sort of grew as a shipbuilding centre. So much so by the mid-19th century, it was making wooden clipper ships, which were world-renowned.
Clipper sailing ships were built for speed over great distances, sailing principally to China to bring back tea. Their world-beating design originated in Aberdeen, where the characteristic streamlined raking bow, called the Aberdeen bow, was developed.
The reason they were called clippers was it was like clipping the sea. So, you know, they were really...
So flying along.
Yeah, flying along.
Captains raced home with their valuable cargoes. The first clipper home secured the highest price in the tea market. Fortunes could be won and lost. The famous Thermopylae, one of the fastest of them all, is remembered by this beautiful scale model.
Thermopylae was built in 1868 in Aberdeen by Walter Hood & Co., another local Aberdeen shipbuilder, and it became world-renowned for its performance, creating record times and taking the tea back from China.
But Thermopylae had a rival, the Cutty Sark. She was another Scottish-built and designed ship and was launched to take on the Thermopylae in the lucrative tea trade. In 1872, both ships raced each other across the globe to be the first to market.
So they were neck and neck, pretty much, but the Cutty Sark lost its rudder and lost about 6 days on the Thermopylae. So the Thermopylae won, but the Cutty Sark did do pretty well, to be fair to it.
But 6 days late, it's still 6 days late, and the winner is still the winner.
That's why we celebrate it here in Aberdeen. Yeah, the Thermopylae got the bragging rights on that race, definitely.
But fate was unkind to the Thermopylae. History remembers her rival, the Cutty Sark, now preserved in a dry dock in Greenwich. But the ship that beat her was sold to the Portuguese Navy, used as target practice for a battleship, and sunk. Aberdeen's maritime traditions have even influenced diet. A salty bread roll that would keep for weeks at sea was invented. The Aberdeen buttery roll, or rowie, became a firm favourite with me when I was a student. Following my nose, I make my way to the Ross Bakery, where the scent of rowies lures me in. David Ross has been making rowies all his life.
You're going to teach me, hopefully, how to make a rowie.
I will indeed. No, I'll teach you to make a proper rowie.
Excellent. I can't wait. I'll
Just
come and join you.
walk this way.
The rowie is rooted in the northeast of Scotland. David claims that his recipe is one of the oldest and most authentic.
David, what's the history behind the rowie or the
History
Aberdeen
is
buttery roll?
a baker somewhere in Aberdeen, we don't know where, it's lost the miss of time, made these, and they were used, taken aboard the fishing boats because they have a high fat and salt content. And they don't go mouldy.
So they keep well.
Yes.
The fat and the salt keeps
That's right. That's
them
correct.
fresh for a long time.
Yes.
Despite the nautical associations, David believes the original rowie was the result of a mistake.
Scotland and France were very close. It was called the Oder Lines, or the Other Lines, right? I have a theory that the baker was trying to make croissants.
Right.
Right, now.
Parisian style.
He made a mess of them. A croissant is quite, not so salty, but it's quite close.
It is.
In the methods.
It's up to the bakery then.
Next, it's into the proving cabinet, where the dough rises for a few minutes before baking. And then, David pulls the perfectly baked rowies from the oven.
That is fantastic.
Well done, Rich.
The aroma is to die for.
And that smell reminds me of when I was a student.
A mouth-watering reward for all my efforts.
Thank you very much, David.
It's
I
all my
shall
pleasure.
guard this with my life.
Leaving with my rowie, I return to the river. There is an old fishing community here at the foot of the Dee called Foot Dee, known locally as Fitty. The fishermen's houses were built in squares to create a natural windbreak. No fishermen left today. They, like the shoals they once chased, are just a memory. But the homes they lived in are now desirable real estate. And beyond the fishermen's houses is the great sweep of Aberdeen Beach, famous for its golden sands. The tide is coming in, the sun is trying to come out. It's time to grab a deck chair and relax to the sound of the sea.
I've come a long way from the source of the Dee, high on the Cairngorm Plateau, and I have to say that the river has made an absolutely fascinating grand tour. And now this is my reward, a view of the North Sea and Caledonia's version of the croissant. Yum, yum.
On my next grand tour, I'm in the southern uplands, discovering heroic tales from the past along the banks of the River Annan.